him getting back in was a part of what they needed to believe in the country again. And I haven't even had this conversation with anybody else, but it's a perspective that is not considered. And I'm giving you, and I'm going to justify this on two tracks. Those people would never have accepted Kamala Harris as president because they would have assumed that again the election was stolen from them. The narrative would have absolutely come from Donald Trump to support that, and it would have been unrest in this nation, the likes of which I don't think we've probably seen since maybe the Vietnam era, if not civil rights era. I mean, I think it'd be the flipped. We'd be looking at different color faces, but we'd be seeing the kind of populace not accepting what the government is doing or saying to that degree, right?
No, yeah, I think we would have seen another weather underground,
Type of situation.
bombings and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's domestic terrorism. That Jan 6 shit would have went then to domestic terrorism level widespread across the nation. And what they believed, now granted, there's going to be agitators, there's going to be disingenuous protesters in any movement, but I think
Of
at the
course.
core of what these people believed was happening, if you do believe that to be the case, that your country is being taken over by some tyrannical government or that the election is fraudulent and the true president has been unseated, you know what? That's what you're supposed to do. That
Yeah.
is what you're supposed to do. And what just happened is that side of the society, that side of the Republican base, that side of the aisle, if you want to say, is calling the bluff of the other side. Because now we actually do have an authoritarian government. We do have a constitutional crisis. We do have someone who is flouting the rule of law. Now, what are we going to do? Is storming the Capitol going to be our recourse? No, I think we're a bit more educated and savvy than that. But are we going to allow it to take hold in this country when they thought their country was being taken from them? That's what they did. Now the onus is upon us. While it's actually happening, I think you'll
Hmm.
talk to just about any Democrat or even most independents at this point that will be honest with you that they are seeing a constitutional crisis. And what are we doing? Podcasts. you
Yeah. Or
know?
the Democrats spent like $20 million trying to figure out how to talk to young people. And then I don't know how many millions of dollars denigrating Mamdani, who's a young person who's exciting young people, and they're
Right.
like shooting him down as an anti-Semite. Now, I think, I've always been an independent. I voted Democratic in the presidential election twice, both times when, or I'm sorry, three times when Donald Trump's been on the ballot, I've been voting against him, and just went Democrat because you got to go with who's going to win when fascism is on the ballot, and when Trump's on the
Mm.
ballot, fascism is on the ballot. Although I've had problems with the Democrats. Like I didn't vote for Obama either time because I saw him as a political centrist who was laughing at the idea of ending the drug war while saying that he smoked weed. That's to me a hypocrite. If you've smoked weed and you still think it needs to be illegal, I don't know what you're doing. Besides, kowtowing to the empire. I think that the MAGA side had a lot of legitimate gripes. And I know that's popular to say as a lefty, but going back to 2008, I would say after the failed Iraq War and the invasion of Afghanistan, yet another war that Iraq that we lied our way into, or the W did. People had legitimate complaints about society, and what the election of Obama was the same thing as the election of Trump and the rise of Bernie Sanders. The elections were not left versus right. They were system versus anti-system. People were tired of the system, that it was not working for them. We were sending people into a meat grinder. We were spending trillions of dollars on a foreign war to take over foreign lands. And people were, meanwhile, NAFTA, signed under Bill Clinton, had taken away manufacturing jobs and had gutted this country. Suddenly, we were not making anything anymore. And we were kind of a client state in a lot of ways. So there was a legitimate problem that things needed to change. Unfortunately, people never Googled Donald Trump and Atlantic City in the same sentence, because if they had, they would have saw what he did to that city. Or maybe you just, Google him in the Central Park Five. My problem with MAGA is that they rose up against a supposedly tyrannical government, but if any of them had black or brown friends, they would have known that we've always lived under a tyrannical government, dating back to 1619 when the slave trade began, all the way through the Civil War, through the Civil Rights Acts, through the Chicano moratorium, in the civil, during the Vietnam War. Um, We've always been in a tyrannical government. As soon as white people started losing power or losing their place in society, it's that whole thing of equality feeling like oppression, and they flipped out on the rest of us. Now I'm afraid to go to Home Depot because they're pulling people that look Mexican over the side of the road all the time, and I've never looked more Mexican in my life.
Well,
So,
you're not helping yourself with the velour tracksuit. I got to tell you, you're kind of baiting them. There
yeah, a
is
little
some
bit. Like, bring it.
take
Well,
some
it
personal
slides off when they
responsibility
try to
on
put the zip tie on. It just slides right off.
yeah. I mean, the Obama thing, which I'm gonna have to push back on a bit because therein lies part of the problem, potentially the solution,
Hmm,
right? The problem lies in, well, yeah, I think he was saying things that he did not at his core believe. However, he believed them to be effective in continuing to create a coalition of the middle that would get him elected over the hardcore racism and, far leaning partisan on, which both sides have,
sure,
that he needs to grasp something in the middle. And so you start to negotiate away certain true positions for practical ones
sure.
for the
That's
politics of the
politics.
moment, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so there's the purists, I think, on the left that want all of those positions that are authentic to you, that we believe you to hold, that your intellect would inform us to believe you have, for you to stay true to, which gives us confidence that you will stay true to them when once elected. I do not take exception with your lack of vote for Obama on that basis. If that is your test, then I could see how he has failed that test.
I
And then,
mean,
but what you get if you flip it and go to the right, that is in fact, I think, what Donald Trump presents to that base narrative. He says the thing that you're not supposed to say, that is truly in the hearts of so many people that think it's, or used to think, or at least edit themselves, at least in public, maybe not in the privacy of their own home, to not say the thing, or to think that that's not how you're supposed to think. You're supposed to be more open-minded than that. Your society dictates that you be more congenial at the minimum than that. And for him to say the thing that's actually on their hearts is which created a political partisan movement into a cult, right? And so we're unwilling on the left to test that, like, because we're afraid when they call us liberal loonies, and we get scared when they say, well, these politics will never speak to the middle, and if you don't, campaign to the middle once you win the left, then you'll never be elected. And so the third party candidates and such are just poison pills to
right.
democracy and all of that stuff that we buy into. But on the right, they stay true to, which again revisits Jan 6th. That's them staying true to what they believe, however misguided in reality it might be. I believe that a lion's share of those people were there because they believed their country was being stolen by an election that was corrupt.
Yeah. No,
So,
I would say like your question about how have I changed? Uh,
mm,
I'm not as much of a political purist as I was, uh,
mm,
because I don't believe what I did was abstain from the presidential election during the Obama years. I didn't like the choices, so I voted down ballot, and that was it. And I don't believe not engaging with the system is a way to change the system. And so I vote now, and I vote compromise. I make, at 19, my first protest was the Gulf War, and I was living in Sacramento. I slept on the steps of the state capitol 3 days in a row, in protest, and there was pro-war people attacking us. We didn't fight back. Like, this was also a time where like Sacramento was covered in, still is, but there was a lot of neo-Nazi skinheads running around. The first punch I ever threw in anger was not a good punch, and it did not land as where exactly I threw it, but was at a neo-Nazi skinhead that was attacking me and a group of people. It was like a pack of them. That was like a
Mhm.
real thing that we dealt with all the time living in Midtown. So I kind of come out of uh, that tradition of taking to the streets and more of a Black Panther. I won't mess with you, but if you mess with me, it's going to be on. And I've kind of grown more towards more of a peacenik. I've always been anti-war, but more nonviolent and more willing to compromise. I don't not regret voting for Obama, but I certainly, when it was time to step up for Harris, I was there, and I knew this wasn't my person on every issue, but this is who represents me better than this other side. And it's interesting what
So,
you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I had a conversation with John Stewart in August of the election year
Hmm.
about my desire in an odd way to vote for, prepare yourself, RFK.
Cancer, I don't know about that.
Okay. It was like where you have moved to not being a purist and understanding the practicality of politics and whatnot. That's where
Yeah.
I was when you were where I became. Like I at that point was tired of this practicality and it
Yeah.
was the Trump of it all and the Biden. It was like,
It was
well, this
rough.
is nonsense, right? And the idea, and you know what, I'm wrong because that August was the August before, right? So we had a lot of runway ahead of us for this campaign, but it was like just when RFK was like leaving the Democratic Party because he wasn't getting a fair hearing, really. They were
Yeah.
clearly trying to shut him down. They had shut Bernie down. Biden was still in the race. And it was like, what the fuck are we doing? Am I
What are
going to
we
have,
doing?
I had zero confidence in Joe Biden, period.
None.
And I'm just voting against the worser of the two evils. Not that I thought Biden was evil, but I just thought that this is not competent. I don't want this man to be president again. He promised me he wouldn't even run, and now he won't release the reins of power. He's so obviously, at the very minimum, having diminishing cognitive issues, and the
Dude,
fucking entire Democratic Party is gaslighting me on national television every day. People I trust and
it
think
looks
that they
fine. Yeah.
take me for a fool. It's like, well, he's skipping in the meetings. He backflipped into the Oval Office yesterday and ran down the fucking elements table off the top of his head.
I
Like,
think he
what
started
the
fine, but it was like a piece of fruit that you bought that's like perfectly ripe at the store. And then by the time you got home, it's just like withered and black. Like 2 years in, it's just like
no.
this little like hardened orange that's like all burnt and terrible. And you're like, but the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, those things were runways, but I think he only had like 2 years in him. And then like
No, it's
after
like
that, the rest
somebody serving you a black avocado and telling you it's fresh cut. And be like, I
exactly right.
just saw them cut it in the kitchen. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
This just happened. I'm like, I
Yeah.
know what happens when air hits avocado for too long. It looks like this. What do you mean you just cut it?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly right. No, yeah, and it was rough. I mean, he was part of the Obama administration who set the record for most deportations. He was like 3.1 million people, and ICE wasn't a thing, but like a small agency until Obama blew it up into what it is now. And the Nation wrote a great piece about the deportation machine that Obama built for Trump. People should go read that. I think it's something like 3,000%. He exploded them, and gave us drone warfare and overthrew Libya. But here's the thing, and this happens in every conversation
minor
about
details, as Trump would say, minor details.
minor details. You know, W got us into this problem. Like nobody ever blames the Republicans for anything that they do. It's just like, what about the Democrats? It's like they're always cleaning up your mess. That's what's about the
And they're
Democrats.
always overcorrecting for the criticism from the right as though they have to win the approval of people who are not going to vote for them no matter what. So,
Yeah,
yes, I think Obama's deportation or immigration policy was an overcorrection in that sense. And then you subsidize the soft power with I forget what they called it, the students being able to stay and these fucking what were these
Dreamers, DACA.
dream dreamers and all that shit. I mean, listen, great, that's fine, but one does not justify the other. And it's like you're trying to have it both ways when in fact, I believe, and I don't even know what his policy would have been because he could never get unconvoluted. But if he had, with what I believe to be a brilliant political mind and a constitutional grasp on history and what is possible inside the letter of that document, he could have created something that would have been comprehensive and probably effective, but it wasn't politically expedient. It was too heavy a lift. And he learned that lesson with healthcare. He was like, oh, doesn't matter what makes sense. This is not how this shit works. It's
Right.
just everything's a fucking trade-off. And from that point on, everything was, and it took him fucking 3 years to realize that the first thing you don't do is negotiate with yourself. So he learned
Yeah.
everything trade-off, and he started with bargaining with himself, and so there was a vast learning curve there. However, it was created out of what I believe to be a genuine desire to better the country. And what we
No
have now
question.
is not that. So Trump is not encumbered by that necessity. He has an
Yeah.
agenda. Fuck everybody who's not on board with it.
That's what I was going to say earlier was what's wild about Trump. And like Harris did the same thing. She just tried to have it all, and we're bringing joy back. Like people are hurting out there. We're
Mm.
still recovering from these, multi-decade wars. We're not, the VA's all hurt. Every year, the social safety net and the social contract get chipped away at. Why are you so happy? Why do I want to be happy about you hanging out with Oprah and Beyonce? I need, kitchen table things. But Trump can lie and it seems authentic because that's what he does is he's a salesman. That's what he's always been. He's a con man. And for some reason, his bullshit seems authentic because it's being authentic to who he is. Whereas Harris, no matter what she did, we could feel that it had been, there was advisors telling her what to do and how to, cut down the middle and what you need. I think that's why like Mamdani did so well. I think that's why Bernie still resonates and AOC resonates. I went and saw them speak down here and you could just hear authenticity. Everybody's got a bullshit meter, especially nowadays. And it doesn't go off when they talk. With
Yeah.
Harris, it did.
With Harris, I feel that the issue for me was that I don't even know what authentic would look like. Like at no point did I have some hard and fast grasp on what she believed or what moved her politically or ethically or what line she was willing to hold or what she ever actually like won on her own. And I know that there are examples you can pull up from politicians that became statesmen in the past that seem to be plucked from obscurity or Obama, one-term senator, but he had written books, and it was the
Yeah.
what president of the Harvard Law Review, constitutional scholar, and like you had, and then he was like vetted like no other president has ever been publicly vetted in the history of the presidency. It's
God,
not
yeah.
like we didn't run this motherfucker through the needle of a fucking like the eye of a needle. You know what I mean? So we knew what we were getting when we got it. However, the entitlement, which again is one of those words that will be lobbed from the right, which they fucking are entrenched in entitlement. So the irony of them
Yeah.
lobbing that word across the net and us absorbing it is rich. But it is true. It's like you want the Bernies and you want even the AOCs to have an opportunity on an evil playing field to compete for that nomination and to just have her placed there feeling as
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
there was no earning it. And it wasn't like she was some fucking vibrant vice president who had captured the imagination of the country and was rolling into this position with momentum. It was
Yeah.
like, again, the third of the worst option, what you
She
could
didn't
do.
even do well in the first time she ran for president.
Nothing. This is the thing. Where does the substance come from? And then you're running around the country with Liz Cheney as it like so he'll really do anything. He'll
Yeah.
talk to like you're we're here. Like
Like
who's that
this is
for? Who wants
this is
that?
a controversial thing to say, but and it goes back to me to the Vietnam War. There were no heroes in those wars. There are people that there was a brotherhood among soldiers, and I think people confuse that with valor and with honor and fighting an honorable war. Like we were just saying, like the guys bombing Iran, these guys are brave and all this. Is it brave to go and violate another country's sovereignty and drop bombs on innocent people? I don't think so. And we have to stop glorifying the people we're a volunteer army. People volunteered to go to Iraq and violate their sovereignty, and Afghanistan and violate their sovereignty and subjugate people for like 2 decades. Can we stop calling them
People
heroes?
volunteered to go in as liberators.
Well,
You're talking about reality, and I'm talking about what motivated them. And sadly, it is so very often two vastly different things. And they are sold a bill of goods. I mean, after nine
yeah.
11, people who would sign up out of their sense of patriotism and out of what their worldview had been shaped by, the news media and the politicians who were gassing them about what this would mean for them to do. And I don't think that a lion's share, if not, I'm pulling a percentage out of my ass because I'm just trying to make a point. But let's say 98% of the people who suited up for that did not suit up to do that. What you described, they had in their minds that they were doing something honorable, either defending their country or liberating one that needed liberation at the point of a gun. And those kind of propagandist tropes that come from the left and the right,
Hmm.
when it suits the American narrative, when the pressure is put on you, you either get on board with this or you're somehow anti-American. We fold on the left to that pressure, and we are duped on the right to that rhetoric every time. And it creates a unified voice of bullshit. And then you end up with these generation of veterans who sacrificed everything for nothing.
It's exactly right. I respect the troops. I come from a military family. My family's fought in every major war in this country. We were at D-Day. My uncle was Benjamin Montoya, was the highest ranking Latino officer at the time. He was a rear admiral and the head of the Civil Engineering Corps in the Navy, 2 tours in Nam, decorated war vet. Um, so I'm not denigrating the troops. I think the ultimate respect is to send them to honorable wars and to not use them like pawns. That's why we need good leaders, not Pete Hegseth. Uh, but you know, but
It
so
must, go ahead, sorry.
no, yeah, that's all. I want people to understand that to me, maybe there are heroes, individual moments of guys saving each other, but I'm just like, you shouldn't have been there, and we shouldn't have sent you there.
It must be
And
so difficult though, as what a Latino American. What's the proper? How do I address your citizenship, if you will?
My brother calls us first Americans because we came over with the Spanish and named this shit. I refer to
Okay,
myself
that's
as
not inflammatory. First Americans,
Native Americans. They don't call this place America. They have a whole other name for it. Uh,
right? Hell,
what's that?
now I said hell.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Ours. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, my people came
Uh,
over with Cortez and the first Spanish conquistadors. Somewhere along the line, we became Mexicans, but we've been here for centuries long, like 2 centuries, longer than this has been the United States. But I call myself a Mexican American.
Right, and you would be viewed as such, and you are
Mhm.
disrespected by both sides
Mhm.
in kind. In other words, it's like I don't know how you people find a home because the first one they're willing to throw in the fire now that Mexicans have filled the rung below blacks is Mexicans. And anything that in Mexican is a bit of a catch-all also. Like you can be El Salvadorian, you can be for, anything that appears to be Mexican, you're gonna get caught in that bunch, and you're the first to be sacrificed politically. And even those who are uh, voicing some of your concerns are not willing to die on that hill.
No, we've always been that. I mean, this isn't the first time somebody's trying to mass deport us. Uh, FDR during the Great Depression needed to make room for white people, needed to make jobs, so they deported I think it was 1 million Mexicans and Mexican Americans, like U.S. citizens to Mexico. People that had come over with work visas, but also like U.S. citizens. We just got rid of them. We did it again in the 50s. Operation Wetback is what they called it. And they, again, deported, yeah, I know, like a million, something close to a million Mexicans again. We're always that political football. But you know what the largest non-white voting bloc in the United States is? The Hispanic vote. We've been here longer than anybody else. Uh, and besides Native Americans, as a people, we've spread out all through the country. 55% of Mexico is now the United States. It was taken in the first war based on lies, the U.S.-Mexico War. And if people want to take issue with that, I would suggest reading the works of, I don't know, Abraham Lincoln, who said on the Senate floor to President Polk, "Show me the spot where an American spilled or a Mexican spilled American blood." He called it out for lies, left the Whig Party over that war and over slavery, and joined the Republican Party as a result. This is a long history, what they're doing to
What
us.
what explains in your mind the amount of support from the Mexican community and Latin community as a whole in this last election for Donald Trump?
I think again, it's system versus anti-system. Um, I think there's a need to be a proximity to whiteness and to power. But, Obama and Biden created, they used to, Mexican community or the Latino community used to refer to Obama as the deporter in chief because he deported 3.1 million people, more than any other president combined. He beat that record. So when Biden comes around and doesn't really change the immigration policies, because that's one thing that they both sides agree on is, or two things, war in foreign countries and treating brown people like shit in terms of immigration. He just didn't buy back any of that. There's no trust. When you roll out and like they rolled out Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine to go against Trump, and Tim Kaine's doing his Spanish. It's like nothing could be more condescending than Tim Kaine speaking Spanish to me and playing his harmonica and saying like, I'm down with La Gente. Get out of here,
I
bro.
don't know. Kente cloths in the Congress during George
Okay, that
Floyd.
could be more. Yeah, that could be more.
Take your harmonica and I raise you a kente cloth.
Yeah, or Bill Clinton playing saxophone on
All right,
Arsenio, you know?
don't you dare. Don't you dare. That was the blues, my friend. That was jazz at its zenith. Now that
Yeah.
man spoke to our souls.
Even Kenny G was like, this is a little much.
You will
But
not, you will not disparage the saxophone in chief.
but
Or as
we've
I call him, the saxophone.
the saxophone. We have Mexicans, I'll speak for us, because whiteness is a thing that is a label that's given and taken away. And during, I think, WW2, um, you always say that we were fighting those white supremacists. The US did it with a segregated army. Black people were not able to serve with the rest of the country. They didn't enjoy the GI Bill. So if you think, oh, well, slavery is a long time ago, I don't believe in reparations. Well, how about all the gains gotten through the GI Bill that were denied Black people on purpose? But Mexicans were allowed to serve, even though you wouldn't know it from seeing Saving Private Ryan or many of the other WW2 films. We always, every once in a while, we creep in there. It's like one guy in the back has a couple lines or he gets killed. Um, but in that demographic, I think at that time in the census, we were considered white, we were Hispanic. And so we were kind of Spanish, so we're European, so we were white.
You
And
weren't a
that's
wedge issue yet.
yet. And then, that was post the big deportation, of the Great Depression. But then heading into the 50s, all of a sudden we were a problem again. So you had to get rid of us because our culture started to, manifest through, well, there was the Zoot Suit riots in the 40s as well. We've always been kind of problematic and easy or seen as and easily disposable. It's a very strange thing, though. It's also, there's that pulling up the ladder. It happens a lot that the first generation or immigrants that come here, they get indoctrinated into U.S. mythology, otherwise known as U.S. history, in order to pass that citizenship. And so they become the good immigrant, and they have to show that they're more patriotic than everybody else. There's a lot of dudes that work in the ICE immigration like detention centers. When I went to visit Angulo in El Centro, California, in a detention center, everybody that worked there was Hispanic. Is the only game in town. Um, and a lot of the U.S. Border Patrol, a lot of Hispanic people. A way of showing that they're American and not an other is to abuse their own kind, and that's just very common. So it's that proximity to whiteness. It's always changed. It was the Irish at one point. It was the Italians at another point. And now it's Hispanics trying to be white. And if anything, this second term, I always think the benefit of Trump is that he's ripped off the mask of U.S. imperialism and just showed it for what it is. And he's showed
That's
us
right.
that no matter, we're just a political football, and as soon as they gain power, they will destroy us because we're not them.
That learning curve that the Mexican or even Latin at large community immigrant is experiencing now post support for Trump. I love what you just said about the mythology of America infecting that first generation, believing that to be a part of it, then they have to become what was holding them out. Like, well, now that I'm in the club, I've got to shut the door to prove that I belong in here,
Yeah.
right? The same thing can be true of the black population in America, whereas we did not aspire to be Americans initially, we were denied the rights of an American as we toiled away in this country against our will. And then on paper, when we were freed and allowed to a degree, assimilate into society, however, not allowed to be equal and experience the justice and the benefits of citizenship, even up until and beyond the GI Bill that you rightly point out. We constantly then tried to qualify for this mythical American citizenship and equality that was promised. And we try to actually reach that shining city on a hill, and we'll be happy to work there for the occupants. We
Right.
just want to be included and a part of. And so part of that process, I think, can be seen as turning our community against the brown community. You would see the strife between the black and the brown uh, exacerbated by not only, and this is true, not only news media and politicians, but then the divisions in our community were so convenient as what we saw as potential immigrants getting benefits that we had so long fought for and are so in need of. I think they and the government, even on both sides of the aisle, will pretend as if the resources are finite and there's only so much money to support the poor. And these poor immigrants, they have nothing. They just came here looking for a better, like the war-torn country from which they hail. Oh, they just got across the border, and we can't just have them walking the streets. So this little bit of money that we can use to support the poor and the destitute, it has to go to them. So there's just not going to be enough money for you who are beyond that stage of poverty, but trying to claw your way into the lower middle class. We don't have enough now for a little bit of tuition programs into college. We don't have enough for no interest loans for a straight A student. We don't have enough for everyone. So now the lowest of the low, which then seems to be your enemy if you're in the upper of the low,
Right.
creates an enemy that not only is not opposed to you, but simply trying to survive themselves, but created by this false premise of finite resources. And then all of a sudden, we have trillions of dollars to invade a sovereign nation and liberate a people who apparently really weren't asking for help. And all
No.
the people in this country who are asking for help, there's just not enough resources to go around. And that creates enemies at the bottom. Well, at the top, they're just raking in all of these monies from contracts and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
war profiteering is crazy. Pallets of fucking money just disappearing. It is a fucking and then they have the nerve to criticize us for looting in South Central. You looted the American government. You
Yeah.
you looted Fort Knox. Like what?
Yeah.
And you're worried about a TV running away?
Yeah,
This is
a tax hike is 2% tax hike is class warfare,
yeah.
but the looting of the country is not
Right,
somehow like, oh
right,
no, we have a democratic socialist mayoral candidate in New York. That socialism is evil. Capitalism kills people every minute of every day, all over the
right,
world.
right.
It's still keeping slavery going in every cell phone and computer and electronic device that we use. Like it's an undeniable thing. You're absolutely right. And yeah, I don't know the way out except to give everybody DMT and maybe think about what they've done. Uh, you
Well,
know,
it's interesting that you say a way out because I would say that what Black Americans have experienced, what this first generation of immigrant is now learning about America, and we are well past that and onto new challenges about
sure.
trying to be afforded the rights and full privileges of an American citizen. We now, I believe, myself included, have found the way outside the borders of the nation into the world that we can reconnect, not in just a family that we come from as our immediate bloodline, but the greater diaspora from which we are been disconnected, but your people, whether they be Mexican or of other Latin descent, all have a home. So there's a place to deport you to. If you think if they could have deported blacks someplace that made sense, they would have done it. Like the problem was we were so ingrained in the society and there was no specific place to send us that you had to deal with us, right? But now
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of self deportation from Black Americans, not giving up their American citizenship, but realizing that there's a world out there, there is a heritage out there that is available to reconnect to. And I am experiencing that at this time of my life uh, in, in grand fashion. Like the fact that the whole continent of Africa really is open arms for Black Americans and what I like to call the historic diaspora, which is every Black person anywhere on the world that at some point back in your heritage will take you to that continent and what I believe to be true literally for every person on the planet. But those of us who are closer to their roots and then disconnected from our lineage intentionally are reconnecting and finding a power base there, supporting that continent as if we do have some ownership and are invested in its success and not being so tethered to the club of American mythology that we need to be on the side of whatever is right for the American economy at the demise of the African continent and all those different nations, varying economies and resources, and we should just pillage and pillar everything we can from any place we can so that America can grow and be dominant. We are no longer invested in that mythology. And so I think is now is the time for all of us, depending on where, I don't care if it is Irish or Italian, German, all these different people. The America is in truth a melting pot of different nationalities, and just some of us are far more outside of the streamline of privilege than others. So you can be now an Italian American, which is not true maybe 120 years ago. You were as much an outsider immigrant as a
Mhm.
Mexican American. What you have to understand is that because it is that melting pot, and that everyone but us, being this Black American that has been cut off from our heritage, has some place to harken back to. There is a power base for all these other people in the
Yeah.
country to draw on. America needs to go back to being a collection of people from other places. I want the experience of the Italian grandmother and grandfather who might have some memory still of World War II and what that was like in the aftermath and what
Yeah.
fascism really does to a country. You need that informed personal firsthand experience so that the next generation does not fall for this chicanery and being disconnected from your roots, no matter where they came, disadvantages you as an American. I'm happy to be considered an African American, and I've only gone to Africa for the very first time in my life this calendar year. So, but I am happy to have that connection. I want German Americans to be called such. Italian Americans, Irish Americans, Mexican Americans, they all bring something of experience to the country. And if we looked at it that way and we're happy with everybody's contribution, we really could be that exceptional nation because we'd be drawing on everybody's lessons and mistakes at the same time.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely and like as a longtime theater artist, and like now just making my first film where I'm producing. I've been on a bunch of films, and the more crews that you're on, I'm sure you've experienced this. It's international, or it's like people from all over the country. Bring if you're
Oh,
doing it right
totally.
and you're not exclusive, trying to keep it to that old Hollywood model of all white. Um, Everybody, like our crew, our DP, Alexis Jackson, who shot 2 episodes of the 1619 project. It's fabulous artist, just next level. She's up, from Detroit originally, now lives in Atlanta. Our lighting guy, Katsu, is Japanese and from Japan. We had he had an assistant, I believe, is Japanese American. It was like, it was just like a whole crew of folks that were from all over the place that all came together and brought their talents. That's America. I think the
That's
thing that
America.
people, yeah, I
You
don't
know what?
think
That's
people
the
realize this
idea of America. That's America at its best. We've never
at its
quite
best.
reached that reality, but if it became again that which we were reaching for, I think the difference between now and then, even in some of our worst times, there was a feeling that we were reaching for that. That shining city on a hill that Reagan talked about never had been a reality. It never got there, but he made you believe that that was still the beacon we were running towards, that that
Yeah,
was the hill we were willing to climb and die on if it meant that the next man might get to the mountaintop. And we're using all of these visuals like the mountaintop of Martin Luther King or the shining city on the hill of Reagan. Like people spoke this way because
yeah,
that's where the mythology actually came from. It's that this idea was one we would not let go of. And in this moment, I feel like the nation is letting go of that idea. And that's why we are imploding and collapsing on the weight of ourselves because we're no longer holding up those pillars of the dream of generation from generation from generation through the ignorance, through the racism, through the nationalism and all of the sexism and all the things that you have to work through to create a nation that is stable and might be the exceptional nation on the planet and an empire that can sustain because we are still a baby nation and it's about to be a crib death. If these conversations like the one you and I are having right now don't consist and persist and demand not only to be had but to be heard, then we will collapse under the weight of ourselves. And what you bring to the conversation for the country, and what I bring to the conversation for the country, and what our ancestors can inform this nation about through us and those who are still in existence and on this planet, firsthand accounts can be imparted when we see fascism on the rise, when we see an economy being pillaged and ravaged by oligarchs, can tell you what this actually is in real time and how it turns out because they experienced it. We miss that opportunity. We will go the way of Rome faster, harder, and in spectacular fashion.
yeah.
That's why we're having this conversation. That's why I want to have these conversations ongoing with you in particular, sir.
I appreciate that, man. No, amen. I think we're right now, we've given up the looking ahead and we're the dog surrounded by fire going, this is fine. This is really
Yeah, everything's
a
fine.
it's a little warm, but this, it's good.
Everything's fine.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild to watch, and maybe this is the darkness before the dawn. That's what I hope. I hope that 'cause I've always felt this, that it's been Black people, people of color, women that have actually made us a more perfect union, because white people would have in power would have just been like, this is fine. We're in power. Everybody else is subjugated. They're our workers. We're making money off of them. And it's been that fight. And I think Mexicans have also been in there, but we've been racially divided. I think, and you have to look at like the project I did 2 summers ago, The Box, where I traveled the country in a bus with 8 other people doing an abolitionist play about men in solitary confinement. It was based on the 2013 prisoner hunger strike in California, which is the largest prison hunger strike in US history. It was like 30,000 people. But it happened because it was a cross-racial alliance. It was basically 4 different shot callers from the different racial gangs were all in the same solitary wing. And after 5 years of silence, they were like, this is torture. And they basically did a truce among all the gangs, the white supremacists, 2 Mexicans, and a Black guy. And they all went like, we're going to marshal our forces and we're going to get shit done. And that's this moment. because when I went across the country, one of the things that blew my mind was how many people I would meet that were system impacted, like prison system impacted, without trying to meet them. I was just like at the laundromat and being a good actor. Hey, I'm doing this show. Oh, I was in solitary in the 60s in Los Angeles, and this was in St. Louis. I ran into a lady whose kid was in solitary in New Orleans in a bar. Like everywhere I went, the Lyft driver would be chattering away, and then he's like, "What are you doing in town?" "I'm doing a play about prison." And it just silence. Yeah, I've heard it's pretty rough. And like I could tell he'd been in, and we just start talking. And but that racialization, brown against black, comes out of, I think, mass incarceration, because in there, you don't know who your ally is, so you go with a white guy or you go with a black guy or the Mexican guy, and then that comes out and permeates our communities. We've gone from kind of a racial harmony to looking at each other as the enemy. And if black and brown people got together, if in schools it was taught that as many black people, if not more, went south to Mexico as opposed to just north, where there apparently wasn't any racism, or west, maybe we would realize there's a fraternity or a brotherhood there, or a community, if you want to make it less gender, based, between black and brown people, that we are the sleeping giant. If we're together, we could change this country and change the world, because we are the global majority. We're being
That's right.
ruled by a very angry minority who, in my opinion, is having an Extinction Rebellion moments.
Shot callers unite. This is the moment. And
Yeah,
this
man.
is just our portion of what we can contribute. And you are a shot caller in your own right and community, as am
Appreciate
I.
it.
And so we're doing our work. I encourage, I in fact implore everyone who sees this and has something to say, call a shot caller and ring up somebody else, get on the line and start having these conversations. Let's talk amongst ourselves while the forces rally against us. And when they come knocking on the door, they will find that we've knocked down the wall between our homes and you have a unified front. That's how we survive. That's how we thrive. That's how we overcome this moment. That's the only way. And
Only
so
way.
this is one wall knocked down. Consider our houses as one property. Our foundations have been united today. So come knocking on these doors and you will be met with nothing but a unified front.
Amen.
Next
Amen to that,
Until
dude.
next time, my friend.